Today is February 4th, and I'm very honored to be joined today by President Donald Ramotar, former president of Guyana. And tomorrow is the end of one of the very important, in fact, the last arms control treaty between the United States and Russia, the New START treaty, which was signed in 2010 by President Obama and then President Dmitry Medvedev. So President Putin made a proposal back in September that, given that U.S.-Russia relations are not in the best condition right now, although they're slightly better than they were under Biden, which is really not saying much because they were horrible then, we're not in a position to negotiate a new treaty. But at least why not freeze this, keep the limitations on, and not just go into a free-for-all. And President Ramotar, I'd like to get your thoughts on that and also the implications for the global South, because that's certainly not taken into consideration that much by people here in the United States, I would say.
Well, thanks for having me, because I think that this is probably the most important issue internationally, although it has not been occupying much of the international news. But it is a very dangerous situation that is developing. This is the first time since the 1960s when President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev of the then Soviet Union signed their first arms limitation agreement, that the world now will be at a stage where we do not have any arms limitation treaty. And this is taking place at a time when there is a lot of tension in the world. We have, up to this morning, I heard on the news that more people, innocent people in the Gaza have been killed. Israel violating the treaty, the ceasefire treaty, and still killing and continuing to try to ethnically cleanse Palestinians from their lands. We see the conflict with Russia and Ukraine continuing, and European leaders, instead of trying to end this senseless and unnecessary war, continues to try to support Ukraine. They seem to want to defeat Russia at the expense of all Ukrainians. And at the same time, we're having difficulties in Africa, the conflict in Africa, and we have in the Caribbean growing tensions. What just happened in Venezuela just a month ago, exactly a month and a day ago, the kidnapping of President Maduro of Venezuela, and the threat against Cuba, which is very, very strong at this point in time. And so this arms treaty is coming to the end of a very, very dangerous situation in our world. And moreover, I would also say that it is coming at a time when international institutions have never been so weak, that the United Nations is in a very weak position right now. And there seems to be a deliberate attempt to practically to destroy it by starving it of funds and by totally disregarding international laws. And therefore, with the type of aggression that we're seeing from the United States against Iran, threatening countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, I believe that a lot of middle powers will be thinking very seriously that the only way they can protect themselves is if they themselves acquire nuclear weapons. And I am not speaking about that just from mere speculation. Only last month we saw the Prime Minister of Canada in his speech at Davos made it very, very clear that the system is not in any transition, but it is broken. And he was more or less advocating that countries of Canada, like countries in Europe, try to come together to look after their own interests, because according to him, he doesn't seem to have any confidence that the mood of America will be have, want to protect them. And we see what is happening with their attitude to Greenland and so forth. Therefore, I would say that it's a very dangerous situation that exists. And the minimum we can try to do is to have the United States government to agree to the proposal of President Putin, who's asking that freeze this for a year and give us opportunity to talk to each other in order to try to build um, a new agreement that we can all be au fait with, or we can all be happy with, or all we can live with. And for us, countries like my own country, Guyana, and many other countries of our smaller countries where we can't afford these type of weapons, but where we will feel the consequences of any nuclear war just as anyone else. I think we have to demand a voice and a place at the table for an immediate negotiations to begin. At least we can begin talking to each other, and hopefully we can have projects in which we can build confidence and prevent our world from being destroyed. I know that a lot of scientists feel that the probability of planets in the solar system with which can sustain Earth is pretty high, but so far we haven't found any. And this is the only world we know. And I think all of us have a responsibility to preserve it, preserve life on Earth, and for our world to continue.
I just want to say one thing for the pessimists who say, oh, it will never happen, and the first treaty is a fraud. And actually, I learned only last year that because of these various START treaties, because we were at apparently 30,000 nuclear warheads before START, the limit is now capped at 1,550. That was a massive reduction. And the way that it actually happened is apparently for the last 20 years or more, we ceased needing to mine for uranium. We were literally taking these warheads and repurposing them for fuel for nuclear power plants, which I think is a beautiful example of swords into plowshares, that mankind could turn their incredible destructive potential into something good for humanity that allows people to get out of poverty, to have abundant energy, clean water. In other words, there are great needs of mankind that need to be addressed. So these same companies that are currently making a profit over the dead bodies, literally, of millions of people could be repurposed for the good of mankind. And I would really like to get your thoughts on that.
No, I agree with you completely in that. I have absolutely no. I think that's very important. We have so much of problems in our world today that only recently I was listening to the news coming out of New York, where I saw people dying on the road because of the coal that exists at this point.
It's now up to 16 people that
dying,
yeah,
who cannot find accommodation, and we know that a lot of people, a vast amount of people, mainly in the global south, many people are going to bed hungry every night. Starvation is still a big issue in our world today. And there was a mountain of other problems where the resources from these weapons, because I understand that it is projected that U.S. alone will raise their military spending to some $1.5 trillion. And I think that is an enormous amount of money that can go a very, very far way in solving a lot of the social issues and to create employment, create other types of jobs that will contribute to preservation of life and to the development of people. Your own organization have been talking about the need to build bridges like the linking Russia and America with a tunnel. These are very huge expenses where the money can be diverted from these senseless spending that benefits no one except those who make weapons of mass destruction, and go into areas where we can link the world up with the kind of infrastructure that you were talking about, and the kind of infrastructure that we see that China is proposing, the Belt and Road Initiative, and many other such very important things can be done that can make our world a far better place, where no one would necessarily have to be unemployed because of stopping of making these weapons, and where building of infrastructure and other type of industries can absorb all the labor that is now involved in making weapons of mass destruction. So I agree with you fully. I think there's an enormous possibility for peaceful usage of the resources that are today going into these areas that can destroy our whole world.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to urge people to attend. You see there, sareforpresident.com. That is how to find out about the press conference, which will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'll be joined by Scott Ritter, who was on the first team to inspect the Russian missile program under the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Agreement, the INF Treaty in 1987. So I'm fortunate to have experts such as yourself. I wish that our president would listen to your wise words as a senior statesman. And maybe to wrap up, I would just ask if President Trump would listen to you, what would you tell him to do at this moment?
I would tell him that for him to etch his name in the history of the world forever would be to come to an agreement to limiting and eventually ending nuclear weapons.
I think you're right. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see everyone watching tomorrow at 4 o'clock.